Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Orbit Live event. I'm thrilled to welcome fantasy authors Evan Winter and K.S. Villoso. Evan is the author of African-inspired fantasy, The Rage of Dragons. His second book of that series, The Fires of Vengeance, comes out this November. K.S. Villoso, the author of Filipino-inspired The Wolf of Onyaro, her second book of that series, The Ikesar Falcon, comes out this September. You see a green button on your screen if you're in Crowdcast that says Buy Evan and K's Books. Click there to open a new window with links to buy their books from retailers in the US, UK, and both authors' local indie bookstores in Canada. This event is being recorded, and you'll be able to access the replay using the same Crowdcast link you used to enter the event. If you have friends who are interested but couldn't attend live, we'll also be able to watch the replay after the event concludes, so feel free to share the link with them. We're also streaming live to the Orbit Twitter and Facebook accounts. Evan and Kay will be talking to each other about their books, and they'll also be answering your questions. If you're watching directly from Crowdcast, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see an Ask a Question button. You can enter your questions there, and you can also vote on your fellow attendees' questions so that the most popular questions are the first to get answered. If you're watching this on Twitter or Facebook, feel free to ask your questions within those platforms, and I'll relay them to the authors. Last but not least, follow Orbit Live and Crowdcast to be notified about future events. We have some exciting events coming up, including one next week with science fiction authors Alistair Reynolds and Adrian Tchaikovsky. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the event over to Evan and Kay.
Hi, everyone.
Hey everyone, and thanks for being here.
I think we're gonna start answering some questions now, or
Perfect. Yeah, let's hop right in.
anything you want to start with.
Um,
Travis's question here. That's a hard one.
uh-oh. Yeah, you start us off with a hard one? Okay, cool.
So, other than your own, what book has had the most impact on your
Cool.
career as a writer?
Oh,
You
that
wanna?
one is tough. Okay, thanks for the question. I am notoriously bad at bests of anything. I think that if I have to pick something, I'm probably going to go back to one of the first books that really sort of inspired me to sort of really took me away from this world and made me feel like I was completely existing in another world. And that might actually have been Roald Dahl's The BFG. And so that's going way back when I was a wee lad, but I just remember sitting there reading that and being completely transported and seeing the words turn into images. Like I just was in that world. So for me, probably that book, because it really showed me the power that reading had to take you to another place.
Yeah. My answer with that is probably Earthsea, and mostly because when I picked it up, it was the first time that I thought that I could actually write something based on my own, like my own history. That it doesn't resemble like the typical European medieval fantasy. So that was like a just an eye opener for me. And like I love those books. I devoured them in a month, like just grabbing them from the library. So yeah,
Right?
you wanna do the next question?
Sure, let's do it. Okay, so let me just answer to that one. Thank you, Travis, for the question. Okay, I'm going to go with Evie's question. It's the top voted one right now. Both of your books are about people who are badass fighters. How much did you have to learn about actual fighting techniques in order to portray that?
So I have not like I when I was younger, I took Aikido. So I actually had a
Mm,
dojo when I was like way back. Maybe I was like 10, 11, 12. So whatever I remembered from that, I used. And like it's actually Filipino martial arts. Like Aikido was their primary, like the stuff that they teach. But they also did Filipino martial arts. They also did like sword fighting and stuff. But I never actually got to join, but I got to watch a lot of it. And like when I did the fighting techniques, I do remember a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, it's more of a case of having problems for her to solve that involves having to use violence to get her out of there. So like you have like so I'll write a scene where there's these people trying to stop her, and she's looking around in her environment, and she's like how do I get out of this? Like she doesn't actually fight like straight on like a tournament style, which is that's actually something I enjoyed in Evan's book, which is like the straight on fighting, which is like it's really visceral and stuff. Like for me, I can't visualize a sustained battle. So with her, it's more that how does she get out of the of the situation? How does she escape? So that's how more or less how I approach the fighting technique. So it's it's not 100% like correct.
Yeah. No, I love that actually. I love that that Queen Talia actually is not afraid to cheat, and she will just sort of go at you in whatever way she needs to in order to come out of it ahead. And and there's sort of an extra level of viscerality to that. And so yeah, I very much noticed that she's definitely not afraid to just do what needs to be done to make it happen.
Like I think there's a scene in the first assassination attempt where she instead of using her dagger she uses a stool. And that actually came up when we were editing. But
Oh,
the thing with the Filipino martial arts is you do have to use your environment to your advantage. Like the first thing that they were teaching us, from what I remember, is that you have to run. If you can run, you
yeah.
run. You don't engage, because that's how you survive. You run.
Hmm.
And if you can't run, that's when you fight.
Hmm. Yeah, and you know what's funny? I actually started in Aikido. Well, I did not go very far, but I started in Aikido and switched over to Jiu-Jitsu, and that's where I've spent most of my time. I've never done any sword fighting except for the little bits and pieces that we do in Aikido, because Aikido was sort of the idea. The original idea, I guess, was the way of fighting once you've disarmed a samurai, or if you as a samurai are disarmed. And what
Yeah.
do you do then, especially when you're fighting against someone who has a sword? So I started there as well. And like you said, the main lesson in almost all the martial arts I've taken was that if anyone has a knife or in general is trying to fight you, your first option should be to not fight. That's always
Yeah.
the first option. And so, coming with, in writing a book, I decided to ignore all of that and have Cal be the type of individual who knows no better than to just always tackle each sort of issue completely head on. So yeah, but no, so my background's in a little bit of martial arts, and in terms of, but not sword fighting particularly. So when I'm trying to describe and talk about the fights in my book, I'm really going after the feel of the thing, and sort of that, again, that we're both using the word, but that viscerality of it. I really want to feel the fight, and so they're not super technical because I don't have that technique as a part of my background, but hopefully they still get the point of the sort of the conflict across.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let's do this next question. Do you want to do Travis's question again?
Uh-oh, is it a hard one?
So both of you started in self-publishing before joining Orbit.
Mm,
What has that transition been like?
okay. Um, yeah, I guess I'll start up with this. That is a good question. It's a tough question, and I guess there's probably really long answers and shorter answers. So I'll try and give a shorter one. I feel like I've been very fortunate in that my transition has been about as smooth as could be. I think that one of the things that I thought that would turned out to be very not true was I kind of had the expectation that once I sold the sort of the distribution rights to my book to a large publisher, that they would be inclined, or at least very much have the power to just make me change a large part of my story. That was a big concern, and I needn't have worried, because really, I think, at least in my experience, and Kay will speak too to this, I imagine, but in my experience, the goal of the of at least Orbit was not to change my story, but was to take my story and say, well, what can we do to make this, to push you? What can we do to help you make this the best version of the story that you are already trying to tell? And so there was that. And the other thing that was interesting about transitioning from self-pub to trad-pub was I didn't expect the passion of the people who Orbit employs. I didn't expect them to feel as if, like, they don't feel like they're doing this as a job. And I know it's a job, and they have to eat and they have to get paid and all the rest, but they really feel as if they feel like fans. And it's
Yeah.
been so sort of energizing to work with people who seem to love these books every bit as much as I love the book that I'm trying to write.
Yeah, like in short, they're as much nerds as we are about
Yeah, exactly.
the whole fantasy. I have the same experience with you. It's been smooth. It's like
Mhm.
it's nice not having 100% of of the burden, especially when it comes to like the editing and the copy editing. Like w- my experience with self-publishing is that I have the final say, which is not as freeing as some people think, because like as authors, like as writers, we have a lot of blind spots, and there's just stuff that like it looks correct to you, but it's not correct to someone else, and it's great to have like a bunch of eyes who are like, hey, you know, you missed this spot. And I've had some embarrassing typos before, so I'm really glad that I think I had one where instead of exertion it said extortion,
Mm.
and I'm pretty sure I didn't write it. I think it was like the word processor decided to make that like that replacement. But it's embarrassing to have those kind of mistakes, and like
Mhm.
it's great to have to have other people working with you.
Very much so. All right, and yeah, thank you, Travis. And I guess I'll start with the next question. Excuse me. I had a hard time putting down both books. So, with being fully engrossed in the stories of both main characters, I was constantly on my toes. With you being the authors, which part of the book, if any, gave you the jitters while writing it? And this is from Daniel. Thank you, Daniel.
uh for me, I think my favorite part was the cons. Like it's a pretty typical con that I use in the first part of the book, but just being able to write it out and then pulling it off at the end, it like you knew how it was gonna play out, but like having that satisfaction that, oh, it worked great. It felt good. That was one part. I also really love the fighting scenes. It's yeah. What else? Uh, it's been a while since I read this, since I read my own book. But yeah, yeah. I think I don't know how much spoilers I should give, but yeah, like like the when we learn who the like when we see the villain, just like being in that in his domain was like it was there was a maybe a part where when I'm pulling from all my horror,
Mm.
like I really enjoy horror movies, and I used a lot of that to kind of increase the tension, like not knowing what's happening and like seeing all these mysterious stuff happening around you, and you like she has no answer. She just has to keep moving and discovering the plot as she goes along. And like for me, I was also discovering the plot at that time because I I'm both a pantser and a plotter. So I've plotted like these events, but I didn't know why they were happening until I was writing them, which was so it was interesting discovering that, and I was like, oh,
As a quick point, without spoiling anything and trying to be as vague as I can, your villain's lair, so to speak, is pretty villainous and pretty kind of horrifying. So that section is kind of like, I was like, oh no, this is not good. This is not good. So yeah, well played. Um, yeah, I guess jumping into what was one of the best sort of parts to write for me, um, right in the prologue. I really enjoyed writing that prologue in Rage of Dragons, and whenever the dragons show up, it was always kind of a big deal for me. And it felt, I don't know, it just felt like it felt like a whole different experience trying to sort of describe the way it looked and felt in my head, sort of the enormity of what was happening and how small and kind of helpless the actual people who have been sort of the main stars of what's been happening, how small and helpless the actual people are when something of that magnitude comes to play. You know what I mean? So that was I think whenever the dragons show up is kind of was kind of a big deal for me. And given that, and without trying to spoil anything, there is a reason that book two is called The Fires of Vengeance. So.
oh, Yeah, it's hard to talk about the books without spoilers, but that end there for your book.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I think I read the last one, so back to you, Kay.
uh, okay, so let's do another hard one.
Oh, goodness.
I have yet to read both your books, but I'm excited for it. If you could describe your book in one sentence, what would it be?
Oh, oh, no, these are tough. My book in one sentence. Um, the Count of Monte Cristo in Bronze Age Africa, maybe. I guess. Or vengeance is one hell of a drug, perhaps. It's also a decent version in one sentence. But yeah, it's really hard to compress these things. But I think that yeah, I guess I was really trying to go for something that you would feel on three primary levels, hopefully, if the job was done somewhat right, which is sort of visceral, emotional, and intellectual. I was trying to, when I say intellectual, it's just the things that I was thinking of in my head in terms of oppression and class structure and violence in general and the effects of violence and right and wrong. And I'm just trying to talk about all of those things in a place that was familiar to me, and in a place where I don't feel we tend to go very often in the genre. And so, I was trying to do all the things I just talked about, and put them into the book that I would have loved to read and would have wanted to have had available to me when I was younger, and really diving into fantasy. So that's way more than one sentence, but. And to you, Kay, one sentence.
One sentence.
Yeah.
It's, let's say, court intrigue, and then the dragons show up.
Love it. Okay.
It's yeah, like you said, it's hard to reduce these things to like one sentence, especially since the genre is epic fantasy, and
Mm,
we have a lot. Like epic fantasy by its nature is just it's a big genre. It's not just one thing. It's battles, and then you have this, and then you have politics, and then you have the hero's journey for many of them, not all of them, but it's yeah,
excellent. Oh, is it my turn?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh no,
Oh,
marketing questions.
here we go. Yeah, we have to get to that one. Kyle, Kyle asks you, Kay, how much does your personal views and politics affect the views and politics of your character?
All my characters. Because like, I do tend to write characters that have their own views and politics. I may not, I don't necessarily agree with them. I do make sure that the way it's framed is that I'm not saying this character's viewpoint is correct.
Hmm.
So the way the narrative framing is done is that like I give them the space to have their own politics, their own views, but I also make sure there's consequences for it.
Hmm.
I don't want to I don't want to write a villain and then frame it as sympathetic when they're doing something heinous. That's something I'm really careful. Like in a way, it's almost neutral. What I'm like me as the writer, as the narrator, it's almost neutral, which is hard for this for the bitch queen because it's from her point of view. So
Hmm.
her point of view is not my point of view. It's it's the point of view of a person in power, and it's you're gonna see as it goes along is that what she believes is not really what I like all the time believe. Like personally, it's her journey does. I guess her journey is that she's learning something as she goes along, like throughout these books. But yeah, that's something I'm very careful with. That I'm not telling the reader that this is what's correct or not. I try to frame it in a way that in the story they're learning based on these like on their existing politics, and then the world is I guess adjusting the world so that it's realistic based on my perspective, which is where that comes into play. But like, I don't write to say that I'm trying to lecture, that I'm trying to put my own, like, oh, this is what I believe and this is what's correct, if that makes sense.
Hmm. No, it definitely does, and
Yeah.
I think, and I hope that I'm doing something similar in the sense that um, I try to ask the questions that are most interesting to me in this in when I'm sort of getting these stories out, and and I try to understand the argument that the different characters have without ever having the answer myself. I think that if I already have the answer firmly in hand, then it's not something that I particularly want to write about, because then I'm just going to maybe be either preaching or attempting to lecture. And so for me, it's more that I have questions, and then I want to understand them through story. And maybe I never ever come to an answer, but at least if I can ask the question and sort of watch it play out alongside these characters, maybe I'll have a better handle on what can happen if people take one option or another. So yeah, definitely politics come into it and do happen to play into everything that we do. It's hard to be apolitical, especially I
It,
think in writing a story.
that's one thing that's hard to explain, where you're like, maybe the way we grew up, the way that we see the world, some people think it's political, and
Mm-hmm.
for many of us, it's just the way that we've learned that the world is. So what looks political to some people is like, it's just us playing out our reality, and like how we understand the world. But like you said, there's a lot of exploration and asking our own questions that we see in the narrative, and it's like, maybe you put these characters in a situation where a certain issue that we're interested in comes to light, and we're discovering it as we're discovering the story. So it's not so much that you're lecturing, that you're saying that this is what I think should be, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a reflection of our realities,
Mm-hmm.
which some people think is political.
Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, and I think you're very much right, and it's I have trouble with the idea that things, as long as a full novel, can avoid politics anyway,
Yeah.
because no, when you read an entire book, the overall perspective is going to have political elements. In whatever way it examines relationships or power dynamics, or even just the way it looks and perceives events, is going to have a political take. Now, if you don't see the political take at all, and you go, well, no, this book here it does not include politics. It may just actually be that those politics align with your own
Yeah.
so tightly that you don't feel that what is being discussed is political. It just feels like fact. Um, and so, yeah, so it's difficult for me to imagine that a longer form piece of creative narrative can be devoid of politics.
So
And yeah,
let's.
is it whose turn is it now to ask
It's
the,
my.
the
It's my
question of
turn.
doing? Oh, good.
Uh, which one do you wanna? Okay, we can talk about our writing career. This top voted one.
Uh-oh.
So, can you tell me a bit about your writing career? When did you start writing? How many books? How many have you published? Will you return to self-publishing, or do you anticipate staying trad? Do you still have a day job?
Okay. I'm gonna, yeah. Thank you for the question, Robin. When did I start writing? I have been writing for most of my life, but not really fiction. Prior to doing this, I was a music video director and also a ghostwriter for in film and television for a little while there. So I've ghostwritten treatments for people. Treatment being sort of like the actual script for a music video. And I've written one movie that did not get made, but that I was paid to write. Um, and so after I finished my almost 2 decade long career as a music video director, where you write all of the scripts for the actual videos you plan to make, I started to write The Rage of Dragons. And I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer. And again, it sounds very cliche, but I literally, when kids in my grade 3 class in Zambia, and I remember this, kids in my grade 3 class were being asked by our teacher. Our teacher's name was Mr. House. We also had our principal was Mr. Kitchen. I don't know what was going on, but anyway, Mr. House asked us, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And a lot of kids said, police officer, fire person, or whatever. And I was like, "I want to be a writer." And I guess what happened is life beat me up enough that I was like, "You can't make a living being a writer. That doesn't make any kind of sense." So I then tried to be a lawyer, and completed undergrad, and I hadn't even gotten to law school. I was about to start applying, and I was like, "This does not seem like how I would want to spend the rest of my life." uh, you know, no, like sort of diss on lawyers at all. Some of my best friends are lawyers, but that's a weird thing to say. But well, no, I've lost my train of thought. But no, so I wrote The Rage of Dragons after coming out of music videos, and it was the first major long thing that I'd written like that. And it was sort of a bucket list item because I was really trying and hoping to be able to to be able to do this, and if not to be able to do it forever, to just do it once, and so that I could, when I shuffled off my mortal coil and left this earth, I could just say, well, I tried and I did it. And do I have a day job? Currently, no. This is my day job. Writing is my day job, and hopefully, it gets to stay that way. So, yeah, thank you for the question.
So with me, I started writing grade school. I don't remember exactly how long, but it's like 25, 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I started writing and I just never stopped. Like I started doing short stories first, and then it just got longer, and then I discovered that yeah, you could type this on the computer and then you could do more. And I've just been writing my whole life, even though I have not actually worked in writing because I went into a career in engineering, and that's what I went to college for. Even though my like I I'm bad at math, but I prefer English and writing related activities. But like you said, it's not really something that you think makes any money.
Mm-hmm.
So and then yeah, when I got laid off, I decided to just go for it. Just like finish the trilogy that like at the time I had one indie published book, which like it's a little bit self published but with a team. And then I just said just I'm gonna finish this trilogy and then I'm gonna write the next one, which has been burning in my head for like a couple of years, which was The Wolf of Orignaro. And I'm just like I'm just gonna give this my all. So that's what happened. I How many books do I have out? I don't remember. I think I have four self-published right now that's still out, in
Okay.
addition to the trad. So I I see myself as being a hybrid. So as long as like it works out, I'm gonna do both.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't have a day job right now. I I'm writing and I'm also working on our business with my husband. So I'm kind of like a technical mercenary,
Love it.
free freelancer.
But my laptop has just informed me that it's going to die in like a couple seconds. So if you could ask the next question, I'm going to go get the like plug thing to plug it in. And you guys,
Okay.
here we go. Here's my pillow. Just keep my spot for a second.
So the next question: what's the number one thing each of you has learned about marketing your books?
Oh, that's a good one. Do you want to go first, Kay?
Sure. I learned a lot about marketing my books. I learned like the I'm gonna talk about my first self-published series, which is a lot of things. It tried to do a lot of things at once. And what I learned about marketing that is that it's not easy. Like you really need to consider genre and audience when you're trying to market a book. And if the book says like if you're trying to be anti like you're trying to do something different, it may make it harder to market.
Mm.
Like uh, this series is basically it's an epic fantasy, but you're looking at it from the point of view of minor characters. So the plot is happening in the background, and you're kind of looking at their slice of like it's like slice of life where like it's just their day to day. Which I guess it works if it's a Hayao Miyazaki film or something where you see their thing play out. But I guess in commercial fantasy, it's a little bit of a hard sell.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess in that case, it's almost like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of story, where it's like the minor characters in the big Shakespeare play, and yeah, like you could totally do it, and you can do almost anything, I think. But it's the more you stray from the beaten path, the harder it probably is to really dial your marketing in and make sure that you're getting the attention from the audience that's going to properly appreciate what you're doing. I think that I tend to be a little, I don't know if I'm atypical or not in my perspective on this in marketing, but one of the things I really do believe, and it's my theory and I could be completely off base, but I really do believe that there is an audience for almost any story. And the tricky thing is that in a sort of a bigger machine that like traditional publishing, they maybe have a harder time digging into some of the smaller audiences that could be profitable if you're maybe self-published, or just the sort of the payment structure is different than it is in traditional publishing. They have a harder time digging into those maybe more niche audiences and being profitable. So the type of things that maybe they sort of need to look at more as a traditional publisher are books that they can understand more clearly how to market. However, with self-publishing, one of the advantages and one of the things that it's shown is that there are tons of smaller niches that have large enough audiences to make a comfortable living as a writer if you can figure out how to get your marketing right and dial it in and speak to that audience in a way that they know that your book is the right book for them. So I believe that you can write almost any story, write the story of your heart. And if you self-publish it at least, and you can figure out the marketing, and that's a big thing to figure out. I'm not trying to minimize or trivialize that. If you can figure that out, you can probably find that audience. And if they connect, and if you connect with them, they'll connect with you. And, hopefully that stays as a very comfortable, happy marriage from a creative
yeah.
and audience standpoint.
I think we've had lots of conversations about trying to find that niche. So I don't think we have time for like 5 hours of that.
Yeah, we could talk marketing for a long time.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so I'll jump in since I left you guys with my pillow. I will now jump into another question. Let's see here. I haven't pre-read these, so I might read something very interesting. From Christy. Thank you, Christy, for the question. Hello, Evan and Kay. I would love to know if you have, and it disappeared. I would love to know if you had already decided where your characters would end up at the end of your upcoming book when the first in your trilogy is published. I'll let Kay go first on that. Did you know where your character would end up when the first in your trilogy is published?
How do I answer this without spoiling it? I kind of knew, but I wasn't sure if that makes sense. Like I had there was like two paths that could have that was gonna happen. Like so basically there were two endings that I had in mind, and I was not decided until I finished that third book. So it was up, like I didn't know how I was gonna end it exactly. Like there were two options that I was doing, and I think I ended up with a little bit like a mixture of both by the end of the third book. That's kind of the problem when you're both a pantser and a plotter, where you're like, okay, so this trilogy was supposed to be very straightforward. Like I had an outline in the beginning that said, okay, this is gonna happen. This is neat, and then as I was writing it, I was discovering new things, and then I was writing the second book, and then I discovered more new things, and then by the third book, yeah, I didn't know which of those two things in the end is gonna be the path we're gonna take.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, it looked a little bit different until I finally ended it, and then like I think it was perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, I think for me, I outline extensively. So did I know where book 2 would end, or did I know where my character? I know where it's all going to end up. The entire my book's going to be 4, so I know where it all ends. And I have some of the very last lines in the entire series written already. So we'll see if those change or not. So yeah, but along the way, it sort of gets a bit more vague. So I know the ending. I know everybody who makes it to the ending, who doesn't. I know that already. I know the general path that everyone takes to get there. But for example, actual sort of solid events in bits and pieces of book three and book four aren't as clear, and they become more clear as I am doing the in-depth outlining for that particular novel.
Okay, let's pick another one. There's a lot of questions. I'm trying to make sure that we're answering at least one from everyone. Let's answer this one. Are you planning on finishing your current series before starting your next series or creating a standalone book?
Oh, I like that too. Great questions, everyone. Thank you very much. Um, I'll quickly say that maybe it's partially to do with COVID-19 and just sort of just the uncertainty of everything, but it's been harder for me to read recently, which is really sort of upsetting. And it's also difficult for me to get into a big, thick chunk and book or series at the moment. So I do kind of find myself looking a little bit more towards standalones, and I do think it would be very fun and cool to try to write a standalone epic fantasy in the way that after the style of kind of like not style, but just kind of like Guy Gabriel Kay does, and he just writes standalone after standalone after standalone, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
So it would be a lot of fun to do that. But to answer the other part of the question, I'm not sure that I will do that. I'm going to finish this series, and I do not have something that I want to start necessarily until this is completely done. I want to make sure I finish this the way that I want and to the best of my ability, and then I'm going to start on that next thing, and it'll probably be another series because I think I enjoy the format. I think I like having the stories build over several books. So even though right now as a reader, it's harder for me to dive into a new big series, maybe again because of the uncertainty of the world or whatever, that's still what I love, and so it's still what I want to write. What about you, Kay?
So I'm already finished with Bitch Queen. I finished
That's
it
right.
like I actually finished it 2 years ago,
Oh my goodness.
and I'm just waiting for edits for it right now. But yeah, that's done. Uh, and I've finished the next one. The next work I had, like the next novel that I finished that, so I'm kind of like playing around with book two of that, and I started a new series during this whole COVID thing because apparently stress is my motivator. I
Okay.
haven't been I haven't been reading as well, like just like you, I haven't been reading, but I've been writing a lot, so it's not good. It's more like it's almost like I'm brainstorming through these two drafts, and yeah, it's just like and I they're both series as well. Like the two projects I'm working on right now are both series. I've done a standalone, but like you said, it's I guess it's the format of the fantasy, like the epic fantasy genre that we love. It's just that we love to just go deep into the story and discover all these new characters and seeing them talk to each other, interact. It's something I also really enjoy doing. So
Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's pretty awesome. That well, it's not awesome, I guess, but turbulent times make you even more productive. I mean, it's kind of a superpower. That's pretty good. Okay, so I'll find the next question, and let's see. Maybe I'll go right to the top. You know what? I'll ask this. Solomon asks, and I'm going to make it so that I can ask it to you to start, Kay. Solomon asks, can you speak to some of the research that you've done on the culture that takes place that's in your book to help build a rich and unique world, and any advice on unique world building?
so so the I was drawing from my own culture when I wrote the Orinyaro, which is in a world that I've been building since I was in my teens, so like 16 years
Mm-hmm.
that I've already been world building. So it's partly like same with my writing where it's a lot of discovery. So I'm doing research and then like doing trying to find research on pre-colonial Philippines or like how history progressed, and then I guess I draw from that, like I explore that through the world. So it's hard to quantify the research because it's basically it's a lifetime's worth where you're like
Hmm.
you're studying this thing, and then you're studying this other thing, and it all comes together when you're trying to actually write. Like even the world building itself is really loose. Like all my notes, some of them they don't make sense. Like they're not logical until I'm writing. And then like I kind of draw from the characters first, where they're going through the world, they're discovering the world, they're discovering the plot. And then that's when I draw on what I've studied in the past, where like you kind of use that to make the world more well-rounded. So it's not like I'm not flipping from the manuscript to a history book and trying to like
Hmm.
add bits and detail of the history to it. It's more like it's a reflection of what I know based on a lifetime of always making sure that I'm studying and I'm doing a lot of reading and stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that I do something kind of similar in that I could probably go a lot deeper than I do in terms of my research. The thing that interests me the most is sort of the human condition as I can understand it at the point in time at which I'm trying to discuss it within the context of a narrative. So in the Rage of Dragons, it's me trying to understand people more than trying to understand a particular place or time. Now that said, I want things to feel real. I want things to be as real as they can be, given that it's a secondary world. So I do, when I'm going through, look things up. And so the architecture in the book is based off of architecture from certain cultures. The weapons are based off of weaponry from certain cultures. I try to be relatively consistent in the way that these people use this type of thing or do this sort of thing this way.
Yeah.
And the people in my book, and I know this is a pet peeve of some fantasy readers, but the people in my book drink something that is like coffee, okay? And it's not called coffee. And that could drive some people nuts when you rename coffee. But I actually have to research what the types of beans that they would have back then, if it was sort of an African place, given the climate and everything else. And I actually went in there, researched that, figured out how they would have grown it, planted it, done whatever. And at the end of the day, I basically just said, and they're drinking this stuff, and it's kind of like coffee. So but you still feel better having done that work because
Yeah.
you feel more sure about what you're writing, and you still feel like, and hopefully that sureness, that confidence comes through in the work because you're like, I know that I've done what I need to do to make this as accurate or as real as possible, and so hopefully the reader feels that too. But
Yeah,
I'm not a heavy researcher.
it's almost like an iceberg where
Mm,
what readers see is a very it's only a small thing, like but in our heads, when we've done that research in our heads, it looks more whole, like that
mm-hmm,
it's it's more real to us. So we can, like you said, we can talk about it more confidently. Like we don't feel like we're just making it up.
mm-hmm. Oh, is it?
Oh, is it my
Oh,
turn?
oh, yes. Okay, excellent.
uh You wanna? I'm gonna answer this one. Sorry, I'm gonna ask this. Being non-American, how hard do you think it would be to break into fantasy as an author writing in a language other than English?
If you're writing a book in a language that's not English, I think that it'll be more difficult to maybe get a traditional publishing contract with one of the big five because the big five are based in New York, and the primary language that is used by the big five is English. So they'd maybe have to translate it first. I'm not like I'm kind of talking from the little that I do know. So maybe the question, maybe Kay will have a better answer. But I would say that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, especially given that we now have self-publishing avenues, and you could self-publish in the store in your country, whether it be Amazon or Kobo or whatever. And if you sort of figure out some of the marketing tools, you could maybe get that book in front of the right audience, especially if it's a book in the language that's in that country. People might be very, very hungry for what you have to bring to them. So I definitely say that of all the times in history, to be doing something like writing and self-publishing or whatever, getting your work and your worlds out there, now is one of the best. So it may not be easy to get into the big five or as easy as if you're writing in English, but that does not in any way mean that you should not go for it. You know, okay.
Yeah, that's my thinking as well. That it, the big five is in North America, or like the English speaking, but there are local, like the wherever country you're coming from, there should be an audience. There's
Hmm.
niche audiences. There should be. If it hasn't been done before, you could do it. It doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean I think I would say that Evan and I were kind of in uncharted territory here at times. Like I'm struggling to say it now because like my native tongue isn't English. Like I picked up English as a kind of secondary language, and I didn't really speak it thoroughly until I was like in my teens, like speaking it on an everyday basis. So even though I've been writing in English, which is weird. Like I've been writing it since I was in grade school, but I haven't like communicated in it verbally into until in my teens. So I would say that if you want to do it, there are, go for it.
Hmm. Definitely. And I'm going to find the next question. And as I do it, I'm just going to casually mention how incredibly amazing it is that you are publishing and writing so many books in what is, I guess, your second language, Kay?
Yeah.
Wow.
Second or third.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. The top question right now is from Michael. And Michael asks, how has COVID-19 impacted your writing slash working on your next book?
I think we kind of answered that earlier. I'm writing two books at once right now. It's insane. Like I took a break over the weekend because I didn't. I like. Sorry. I took a break since Thursday last week. Like I didn't want to write anything because I didn't want to show up to this thing looking like a zombie, which is how I've looked the last couple of months.
Because you've been working so hard?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. So, yeah, my answer is not that. Yeah. So let me see. Let me just scroll up to the chat here. Are any of the people from the publisher here? It doesn't look like it. Yeah, it's hard to work. It's hard. It's difficult to get the words down in every day, and it doesn't mean that the words are worse because it's hard to work. The words are the words, and the story is the story. But it's difficult to stay focused on things on the world I see in my head when for me right now, because the real world seems so absolutely chaotic. And there's that idea of the starving artist being some sort of like kind of virtuous paragon of something. And it's not. I don't think it tends to be true. I don't think it is, generally speaking. The more secure and comfortable you feel, the more you can really explore your creativity. At least in my own personal experience. So I find it easier to work and to be creative when times aren't so wild. But that said, it is work and it is the passion of my life, and so it will get done because there's nothing I would rather do.
So this is an interesting question by Lois. Interesting because of our background. When during the writing of your first book that you realized this book could get published?
Ah, okay. Excuse me. I guess for me, thank you, Lois. And for me, I guess when did I first realize the book could get published? When I was listening to podcasts about self-publishing, when I was reading Wool and found out Hugh Howey's story and how I thoroughly enjoyed Wool, and I was like, this is awesome. And then I was like, this was self-published, and it sort of started to break down some of those barriers in my mind about the idea that indie publishing and traditional publishing are very different in terms of quality. A good story is a good story is a good story. It doesn't matter where it comes from. And then I did something like I read Phil Tucker's Path of Flames, which is one of the first big epic fantasy books I'd read that was self-published, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I was like, and when I read Wool, it was a bit more science fiction-y, so I was like, oh, people can do science fiction stuff that was self-published. And then I heard about The Martian, again, science fiction. When I read Path of Flames by Phil Tucker, I was like, oh, we are doing this in epic fantasy as well. And so to answer the question, I never even actually considered or worried too much about traditional publishing. And to be completely frank, it was because I did not think that they would be that interested in what I had to offer. But I wanted to tell the story that that was in my head and heart. And my theory and my belief was that because I loved the idea of the story so much, I really hoped that other people might enjoy it too. So once I saw those other self-published works, once I saw that they existed, I believed that I could tell my story and that some people might read it and enjoy it, and that to me would be enough. Okay.
Well, I tried with traditional publishing for a while. Like I tried to query for a bit, but that was back in the day when it wasn't like the gatekeeping was not maybe as uh as good as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
like so I've had a ton of rejections. So when I first started self-publishing, it was more of a sense of I'm giving myself permission to finally move past the rejections. So it's not like I wanted to stop focusing on getting rejected and feeling like I don't belong in this genre, and I just wanted to just write my stories and share them with people. So so it's not thinking that could this get published or not. It's me giving myself permission. Like when I wrote that, like the first book that I self published, when I wrote that, I knew it was gonna be self published, and yeah, I was giving myself permission. I was saying that yeah, like there's no way that I'm gonna do that to myself again. That I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
like r- make decisions based on if somebody rejects me or not. This book is gonna get published, and it's the same with every book that I've written since, and will write from
Yeah.
here on.
Yeah. No, and I love that because again I directed music videos for almost 2 decades, and before that I was actually a card carrying actor for a very brief
Oh
short
my
time.
god.
Yeah. Uh, but the thing that you have to, I think, well, one of the things that's important to learn or can be important to learn is not to take that rejection personally and never to believe that it's a completely indictment of you. It might be just that the individual doing the rejecting, especially if it's a director doing it, because I've had to do this a lot, they have a vision in their head of what they want. And if you're not fitting that vision, then you often don't get selected. And the problem maybe sometimes is that the vision of the establishment may not be what we, who are maybe not as much of the establishment, want to do or want to speak on, right? And you shouldn't ever, I hope, let that prevent you from speaking because the voices are important. So, am I asking a question here? Let's see. Oh, a question from Brigitte. Brigitte, what do you want to see for non-Western fantasy in the future? What conversations or stories do you want to see? And also, what other stories would you like to write yourself?
I want to see a lot of non-Western fantasy from POCs,
Hmm.
but I wanna see more fantasies where people are drawing from their own heritage, from their own worldview, like from marginalized voices that we have not heard in the past. I want to see more, like I want to read something and like whatever struggles that that person has, like from their perspective, from how they grew up. I want to see that, and I want that to become normal, as opposed to we still have kind of this thinking that diverse fantasy is diverse fantasy, and like it's not mainstream. Like you have to read that fantasy, if you're like the people who are reading that fantasy are people looking for diverse reads, as opposed to it becoming mainstream, where just about anyone can just pick it up. Like I don't I didn't read Game of Thrones because I'm looking for like English setting, or which sounds strange, but to me, since that's not my norm, it I could be like looking for
Hmm.
something different. Like
Hmm.
people think that it's neutral, but it's different to me. It's strange to me, but I read it for the story. Like I
Hmm.
read the whole series to to go on a journey with these characters. Not so much the setting that interests me, but I want non-Western, like non voices that we haven't heard before to be more common, to the point where it's not strange anymore. That they're not like we're not being put push aside that there's a mainstream and then there's a non-mainstream where the only difference is the color of your skin.
Mhm.
And what's like, in terms of other stories I would like to write myself, I'm not sure. Like I keep having a ton of ideas for my future stories because I just love to experiment with different settings and different characters and like having really like characters with a lot of issues in their lives and then putting them in a unique situation and then just seeing how the story plays out from there. So how about you?
Uh, yeah, I think that in terms of fantasy from a non-Western perspective, I think that I really have been reading more of that, been finding more of it because I think more of it has been available in a way that maybe it wasn't as easy to find before, right? But as time goes by, it's becoming a bit easier to find, and I would love to see that continue and to grow. Not even out of self-interest in any way, but just because I'm a fantasy reader, because I love to read about things that aren't necessarily common to me that don't happen to me in my everyday life, about perspectives that maybe I might otherwise miss or not even know or understand. That's why I'm a fantasy and a sci-fi reader. That's why I read SFF, right? Because I want to know more about the overall human condition. And a large part of being able to do that in a full way is to try to understand the stories and the cultures, the backgrounds, the identities, the perspectives of others. So it's been a very exciting time for me as a reader, and I'm definitely trying and to do more and doing my best to just find all the gems that sort of would connect with me on a narrative level. So yeah, I think it's great. And in terms of what else I want to write in the future, I think that I want to keep trying to mine my own experience, my own perspective. And it is like I grew up in Africa, in Zambia, with a British educational system. Like I went to British schools with British teachers, like Mr. Kitchen and Mr. House. Like, I went to British schools. So I have that very kind of weird blended experience, and I want to understand that and mine it and explore it more, and to maybe try and deliver that in the stories that come into my head. So yeah, I'm gonna find a question. Um, okay, so I will ask. No name. But do you feel you write characters who are more similar to you or not at all like you?
That's a good question. I write characters that are different from me.
Mm,
Because I love exploring like different personalities and trying to see how they would react in that situation. So like say the way Italian is, the way she maybe overreacts to certain situations or like how impulsive she is. That's not me. I'm the
mm,
complete opposite of that. But so a lot of the characters I love exploring is that I really like seeing their flaws come out, like maybe a more quiet guy. I've had characters like that, and then how would they react in a situation where they're surrounded by like vicious mercenaries trying to like the bad people, and then they've been raised as a good guy, and they don't know how to react, but they have to survive. Like so I love seeing the interaction. So it's not so much that the characters that I write are similar to me, but it's just what I find fascinating for that
mm.
particular story.
Nice. Yeah, and I think for me, actually, I do write characters that have elements of myself in them. The further away from main point of view characters, maybe the more they diverge, and they're my attempt to understand other people and develop them three dimensionally as I am able to. But it's been interesting because, for example, Tao is not me at all, and I am not Tao. But a lot of his sort of psyche are things that make sense to me. And so it's been interesting, I guess, because sometimes readers get very frustrated with the decisions he makes, and I completely understand that. And
Yeah,
they're like, "Why would you do that?" And a part of me goes, "Why?" Because
it's
I would
entertaining.
probably do that in that situation. So I understand him in that way. And again, it's not because I am him or I'm trying to channel myself through this character. I'm not. But everything he does rings true to me because I could believe that, given in the same circumstances, I could behave that way. And so, yeah, he's very specific in that sense, in that I understand him. I mean, he's the main character in my book, so I understand him the most fully. And so he is. There are similarities, at least in sort of mindset, if not in behavior and outcomes and all the rest of it. So.
Okay. I think we've gone through half the questions.
Nice.
Only half.
Oh wait, no, not yet. 50%. That's almost a fail. Hold on. Okay.
I like this one. What helps you to write action scenes?
Okay. I guess I'll start. What helps me to write action scenes? I write them the way they feel. This is maybe actually not very helpful as an answer, but I write them the way they feel in my head. That's really completely not helpful. How it helps me write action scenes? I just can see them kind of, and I can feel them, and I try to deliver them as accurately as I can, given the way the emotions and the characters are interacting in my head. And then what I do to hone them is I read them over and over and over and over again in editing, and then I just try to make them flow. And by flow, I just mean I never want my eye to stop moving over the page and over the words, especially not during a fight scene. I want to feel as if each moment connects seamlessly into the next. And so my job in the edit of a fight scene is to try to remove all of the obstacles to that, having that happen. So anything that trips me up, any word or moment or even periods or commas that trip me up or take me out of the actual scene, I try to adjust, remove, or refine those so that the scene can play out just like it does in my head. So that was.
Do you kind of see like all the blood just like flying?
Yeah, I do.
Dramatically.
I do.
It's kind of like a 300 effect there.
A little bit, yeah. So, and for you, how do you write them?
I kind of said it earlier, where I see them as problems that have to be solved, and they have to be solved with violence. So,
as one does.
It's almost like I joke that a lot of the characters I write are kind of like berserkers, where they're just like until it's done. So there's no choreography to the scene. It's just them trying to escape and using whatever tools that they can find. If they have to bite someone or if they have to punch someone, or so it's a situation they're trying to escape until they've disarmed their opponent, and then that's done.
So do you pre-plan them in a way? Do you know how it's going to play out, or do you just sort of go and this is happening, they're fighting, and you just start writing it?
Yeah, like I put them in a situation, and then I'm like, okay, so this is what the enemy does, and then how are you gonna try to escape it? Sometimes I ask my family to help to help me. So one time I had my son like, okay, hold this sword. And it's not sharpened. It's dull. But like hold this sword and then just try to swing at me this way. It's because I'm trying to see how I can escape it. And he's like, why? This is like, what a strange request, Mom.
The life of fantasy writers. Oh, wow. Oh, is it?
I think.
Oh yeah, I think. Yeah.
The voice of God has spoken.
There we go. I guess we're basically about out of time. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for asking all these wonderful questions. And Kay, thank you. It's an absolute joy to sit across from you virtually and to have this conversation. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you. We're good.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, and
Thanks,
have an amazing night. Thanks for joining us.